turn the microphone over to you and look forward to you sharing an update of what you're doing and some insights in this battle that we're all fighting.
Okay, thank you very much. Why should no-fault divorce be repealed? I've got a number of reasons. I'll try to go over them quickly for the sake of time. I did ask Alan and Matt to come and join me because there are some areas that I think Alan and Matt can speak a little bit more directly and authoritatively than I can. We've worked together on a lot of these things, and I'm just going to give you my presentation, and if there are some questions, maybe Matt or Alan would be better to address them, but I'm going to go on. So first off, no-fault divorce should be repealed. Number one, it should be voided completely due to vagueness. Here's what our Texas Family Code says. Section 6.001, insupportability. On the petition of either party to a marriage, the court may grant a divorce without regard to fault if the marriage has become insupportable because of discord or conflict of personalities that destroys the legitimate ends of the marital relationship and prevents any reasonable expectation of reconciliation. What does this mean? There is no definition whatsoever of insupportability. Nobody knows whether a discord or a conflict of personality is going to destroy that relationship. It's basically one person who's giving his or her word. Often the person who does that may also be hiding a reason as to why he or she is filing for divorce. I'm having an affair and I'm having many women and my wife does not like it. Obviously, there must be a discord or conflict of personalities that she's not letting me have an affair. Or the wife may say the same thing, or the wife may say, you know what, I found a man who has more money and he takes me out more and he's retired, whereas my husband has to work 40, 50, 60 hours a week, and I feel real special around him. Obviously, there must be a discord or conflict of personalities. The reality is, insupportability has no definition, and this whole thing that stating a reason for divorce, which is the reason that most people use for divorce, there's no objective standard. It is no fault. It's the petition of one person, and it doesn't even have to be a petition. The person can just go up and make something up, can lie about it, can make something up, and they can get a divorce. And in Texas, it's in 60 days is the minimum waiting period. What this means to me, this unsupportability clause, is that the state of Texas has made every single marriage in the state temporary by statute. Marriage is a commitment of two people that they make toward each other, often a covenant before God in which they're pledging themselves to God and to each other. And the state of Texas is saying, we don't care. By our statute, every single marriage is now temporary. And that leads to my second point, is that because of the often religious nature of marriage, basically this should be a religious issue, a religious liberty issue. What is the state doing interfering in the religious liberty, the religious exercise, the religious practice of two people? So for example, if you're a Catholic, I'm not a Catholic, but if you're a Catholic and if you want to have a Catholic marriage, and the Catholic Church believes in the indissolubility of marriage, you have to take very specific steps. Both of you do. You have to have certain things that you've done in order to have a Catholic marriage. A Catholic marriage, by definition, is indissoluble. Why does the state think that they can come in there and all of a sudden dissolve that marriage, as if the religious vows mean nothing? If you're a Christian, an evangelical who says, I believe in a covenant marriage, my marriage is first a covenant with God. It is a commitment to my wife. It is a promise that I have made in front of these witnesses. And by the way, it is also a symbol of Christ's love for the church, the relationship between Christ and the church. Why is the state of Texas, by what authority do they have to come in and dissolve that marriage? It is a religious liberty issue. In Houston, I think it was 2 years ago, the mayor was requesting that certain pastors submit their sermons for some type of inspection because the pastors were preaching against same-sex marriage. And there was an outcry. How can the state be involved in this issue? This is a religious liberty issue. How can the state be involved in destroying marriages that have been taken as a covenant before God? The state is now dictating religious practice, and the church is not saying a thing. Number 3, in many cases, the marriage is completely restorable. There was one study that was done, and Maggie Gallagher, who's written a lot about marriage, has said that there was one study that showed that 86% of, quote, unhappy marriages were able to turn their marriages around within 5 years, and they claimed they were either happy or very happy. So, in other words, basically what we're doing is we're allowing divorce because one spouse is unhappy. I'm just unhappy right now. And as one person said, there's not always unhappy marriages. It's an unhappy spouse. The other spouse may be perfectly content. But because of one person's happiness, the state of Texas is going to interfere and say, well, that person's happiness should be primary. And yet, if they stick it out, in 86% of the cases, unhappy marriages were able to become either happy or very happy. Now, I can go back to my time in the military. When I entered the Army, I was not happy at the very beginning. I felt like I had been lied to and everything else, and I was going to get a general discharge. I was going to do it because my recruiter lied to me. Well, guess what happened? They didn't let me out. I didn't get a general discharge. I had to serve my 4 years. So, but you know what I found out? During that 4 years, in spite of my feelings at the beginning, I actually enjoyed the Army. It was a valuable experience. I could have short-circuited that had they let me get out somehow. But it's the same thing with marriage. You can find that conflicts can draw you closer together. And this whole thing that, well, if somebody's unhappy right now, we don't even know why they're unhappy. But we're going to allow a marriage to be destroyed. And yet the reality is that within 5 years, 86% of the, quote, unhappy marriages were able to report that they were either happy or very happy. Number 4 is that allowing for unilateral no-fault divorce actually works against the state's interest. The state should have an interest in preserving marriage. So for public policy, the public policy of this state, and this is section 153.001, the public policy of this state is to, 1, assure that children will have frequent and continuing contact with parents who have shown the ability to act in the best interest of the children. And I'll get to that best interest of the children in just a moment. Provide a safe, stable, and nonviolent environment for the children, and encourage parents to share in the rights and duties of raising their child after the parents have separated or dissolved their marriage. So even here, the state recognizes the importance of both parents being involved with children. And this is talking about even after a case of divorce. How much more does the state not recognize that both parents being together have a more valuable and more important influence in their children's lives? Edward Scafidi in 2008 did some research on the costs to taxpayers, the American taxpayer, for unwed childbirth and divorce. And by the way, unwed childbirth does increase with divorce. Young girls of divorce tend to have more unwed childbirths and also more abortions. So if you want to fight the abortion argument, reduce divorce. If you want to stop unwed childbearing, reduce divorce. But he came up to the conclusion with this. He said to the taxpayer, we're not talking about the families that are involved or anything else. The taxpayers are footing the bill of at least $112 billion a year for unwed childbearing and divorce. And he also added, and that may be a very conservative number. He thought it could be up to maybe $165 billion. The cost of a Hurricane Harvey is taking place every single year throughout our country. But because it's spread out in a state here, a state there, all over the place, we don't see the actual impact that it's having. And this is just to the taxpayer. We're not talking about the families themselves. We're not talking about the children that are being destroyed. We're talking about the taxpayer. The taxpayer is subsidizing divorce, and we are not telling them, we're not being honest to tell them that. There's criminal reasons why it's in the state's interest to preserve marriage. As we've heard with some of these school shootings, 26 of the last 28 mass shootings came from a child of a broken family. One man that I interviewed at the Values Voter Summit back in September, he made the comment that was this: once you destroy the family, society crumbles. The Atlantic magazine in 1926 wrote an article about no-fault divorce in Russia. Now, I think that we would all say that the Atlantic magazine is not a magazine, a bastion of conservatism, but they were talking about the destructive nature of that was taking place throughout Russian society, because when the Bolsheviks came into power, they had one enemy that they had to destroy to get control. That was the family. How did they destroy the family? Unilateral, no-fault divorce. Divorce on demand, divorce for any reason, divorce for no reason. This happened in Russia. We defeated the Bolsheviks, we defeated communism, and yet somehow in in our great wisdom, we have now taken the system that they had and we've Americanized it. We've taken the Russian system of no-fault divorce, unilateral divorce, divorce on demand, and somehow we're expecting different results, which, as everyone knows, is the case of an indication of insanity. Washington Law Review quoted a judge, Judge Alice O'Leary, and she said this. The judge presided over 4,000 hearings, and she was convinced that at least half of the people who start divorce suits are really hoping that something will stop them before it's too late. They insist they want a divorce, but at the same time, they are wishing that someone will step in and straighten things out. The tragedy is that in most cases, nobody does. Nobody does. And the state also is complicit in this. Nobody does a thing. Our country's shocking divorce rate, the highest in the world, could be cut to a great extent if we tried to cure sick marriages by treatment instead of rushing them into the execution chamber of divorce. And that's what our divorce attorneys do. Oh, you want to come to divorce? We'll get you in there. We're going to kill your marriage for you. And yet, there is a difference between a completely dead marriage and a sick marriage. If every patient that went to a doctor with a headache or a muscle ache or something like that came out dead, we'd say, well, listen, I'm not going to go to a doctor anymore. All I need to do is be healed. And yet, our divorce attorneys, that's what they do. They kill families. They don't just kill the relationship between two people, they kill families. There is considerable evidence that almost half of the divorces could have been averted if someone had stepped in at the right moment and talked sense to the parties. This was a family court judge. There's another two people that wrote this. It's called Second Chances, a proposal to reduce what they called unnecessary divorce. And the unnecessary divorce were these divorces where people were saying, we really don't want a divorce. Maybe sometimes both people said, oh, we want to try to work things out, but the attorneys have one tool. It's the hatchet. It's the machine gun. It's whatever you want to call it. It's the execution chamber. And they were saying, keep the attorneys out of this whole thing. So they had proposed legislation on how we could reduce unnecessary divorce. Fifth reason that I would say we should repeal unilateral divorce is that it is not in the best interest of the children. And here's the dirty secret in Texas. We have a Texas Family Code, 1,548 pages. And they talk about the best interest of the children. We must act in the best interest of the children. At least 140 times in these 1,548 pages, the best interest of the children is referenced. Not once does it define what the best interest of the children is. The best interest of the children may be what a judge thinks it is. The best interest of the children may be what an attorney thinks it is, a social worker, a guardian ad litem. You know who does not know the best interest of the children? The parents. The parents don't know the best interest of the children. Somebody else always knows the best interest of the children. There is no objective definition of what the best interest of the children is. However, in order to make that sound so pious, the best interest of the children shall always be the primary consideration of the court in determining the issues of conservatorship and possession of and access to the child. Who are these people? Who are these people that they're saying that they're acting in the best interest of the children? Furthermore, the American College of Pediatricians, now these are people that are actually interested in the health of children, not interested in profiting off of the destruction of families. The American College of Pediatricians took the position that the best scientific literature to date suggests that, with the exception of parents faced with unresolvable marital violence, children fare far better off when parents work at maintaining the marriage. So I have defined the best interest of the child as being raised by his or her natural mother and father in an intact family, period. That's it. There's no second. If you're advocating divorce, you have already taken the best interest of the children, and you've said, well, we're really not talking about the best interest of the children. We're talking about the second best interest, the third best interest, the 20th best interest. But they are not talking about the best interest of the child. They're lying in the Texas Family Code. And the statistics, by the way, are beyond disputes. And I'm going to mention some statistics here. And this is not considered a slam on either mothers or fathers. It's not a slam on anybody, but these statistics come based on fatherless homes. So I know some mothers are like, you're talking about fatherless homes. What about motherless? Okay, parentless home, a parent that's missing. We'll put it that way. But these come based on studies done on fatherless homes. 63% of youth suicides come from fatherless homes, 5 times the national average. 90% of homeless and runaway children come from fatherless homes, 32 times the national average. 85% of children with behavioral disorders come from fatherless homes, 20 times the average. 80% of rapists with anger problems come from fatherless homes, 14 times the average. 71% of all high school dropouts come from fatherless homes, 9 times the average. 75% of all adolescent patients in chemical abuse centers come from fatherless homes, 10 times the average. Now remember, we're talking about the best interest of the children, because the attorneys, they're going to talk about the best interest of the children. You must talk about the best interest of the children. How is this the best interest of the children? 85% of all youth in prison come from fatherless homes, 20 times the national average. Daughters. How about daughters? We're talking mostly a lot about sons here. What about daughters? 53% more likely to marry as a teenager. 711% more likely to have a child as a teenager. 164% more likely to have a premarital birth. 92% more likely to get divorced. The best interest of the children, that dirty secret that we try to talk about in the family code that really is not defined, but all of these people invoke as to why we should permit divorce. Child abuse and neglect in a single-parent home is almost double that of two-parent homes. I can go on and on and on. And by the way, I haven't even addressed the issues of suicide of children. I don't know what the statistics are for that, but I don't have a specific number to bring forth right now. But suicide in children of divorce. Or what about children of divorce who walk away from their faith because the church did nothing? They've gone into atheism. They've left. They've become agnostics. They want to have nothing to do with the church because of their parents getting divorced. The sixth issue is that unilateral divorce actually violates the contract clause of the United States Constitution. Article 1 of the United States Constitution says, "No state shall pass any law impairing the obligation of contracts." Marriage has all the elements of a contract. There's the offer, there's the acceptance, there's a consideration paid. It's done in front of people. Whether it's a written contract or a verbal contract, it is a contract. And yet, the Constitution of the United States says that the state shall pass, no state shall pass any law, even a divorce law, impairing the obligation of contracts. Two people have entered into a marital contract. We used to call it that. Now we're going to have to try to change the wording so that we get rid of the marital contract idea. But you do have a marital contract, and no state should pass any law which would impair the obligation of that contract. Seventh reason, and by the way, again, two people enter into a contract in marriage, generally speaking in America. There may be some that still are, it's an arranged marriage or whatever like that. Two people enter into a contract, and yet one person can dissolve it for any reason and not be punished or actually be rewarded for it. And the reward may be, I'm going to get the kids, I'm going to get the house, I'm going to get future money from the husband or wife that I am divorcing in the form of child support. It's a preposterous, it's an outrageous law that would allow this to take place in our system of justice, our family court system. Seventh reason is this: it deprives a person of due process. This is a 14th Amendment issue. And the 14th Amendment says, nor shall any state deprive any person, doesn't say just single person, it doesn't say married person, any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. And yet, in our Texas Family Code, due to this nebulous thing called insupportability and irreconcilable differences, and one person just wants out of the marriage, the other person, the innocent spouse, may lose half of his or her assets, may be hit up for child support, may even be ineligible to travel overseas, because sometimes what happens is, well, this person might be a flight risk and not pay his child support, so we can't give him a passport. In many instances, I would argue that no-fault divorce is a civil asset forfeiture. Somebody is being told by a judge, you must give half of your assets to your spouse, or more, maybe 60%, maybe 80%, depending on the state. It is civil asset forfeiture. What has the person done? He said, wait a minute, he or she, I wanted to keep my marriage. I did not want to have a divorce, and you're punishing me. Oh, no, 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 we're not punishing you. Well, what do you call it? You're taking more, at least half of his assets. You're destroying his or her family. And actually, you're also changing his legal status. You are forcefully changing that person's legal status. He had to get permission from the state to get married, to change from single to married. And now the state will say, but we don't want you married anymore, so we're going to claim that you are divorced. But I don't want to be divorced. Is there no due process protections involved whatsoever? So when I was going through a divorce, I kept on thinking, I almost wish I would have been accused of rape or murder, because at least with rape or murder, I had a presumption of innocence and you had to prove my guilt. In no-fault divorce, you're guilty. And even if you can prove that you're innocent, you're still guilty. You lose no matter what. There's something wrong with a system that says in 100% of the times, without any exception, the person who does not want to be divorced loses. Well, what do you mean he loses? Maybe he gets 60% of the assets. Maybe he gets more time with the kids. He wanted to keep his marriage. That's what he wanted, or she wanted. He's lost. There's something that person's due process is being completely deprived of by him. And by the way, you can't have your life, liberty, or property taken away from you, but you have to have it done only with due process. Without due process, as what takes place in the unilateral divorce courts, none of this stuff should even be allowed to take place. It's interesting because we talk about Islam and the triple talaq. How outrageous that a man can turn to his wife and say, I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you, and they're divorced. We have the triple talaq in America. We have the triple talaq in the state of Texas, except we've equalized it. Now a man can do it to a woman, or a woman can do it to a man. And the family law attorneys will say, well, we have to have no-fault divorce. The reason we have to have no-fault divorce is so that it doesn't cost the spouses too much money. It's got to be easy and convenient. Well, the whole thing is crazy. The divorce attorneys are profiting like crazy out of this whole thing. And what happens is they always go back for modifications. This is the cash cow of the divorce attorneys of the state of Texas. And they don't like being told that that's what it is, but they know it. And they're doing everything that they can to protect it, which is why they're opposed to getting rid of no-fault divorce. In India, by the way, talking about the triple talaq, India repealed the triple talaq because they said it did not afford the wife due process. It is amazing that India would have a higher, keener understanding of due process than the United States of America. But that's what it is. An eighth reason why we should repeal forced unilateral divorce on demand is that, quite simply, it can criminalize an innocent spouse. What do you mean criminalize? So the person who is trying to keep the marriage together is usually at a disadvantage because, number one, the person who files for divorce first is at a natural advantage. That's just the way it works in the state of Texas. The second thing is that he or she is trying to keep the marriage together while the other spouse is plotting what he or she can do to get more money, get more assets, get more time with the kids, maybe be sole conservator of the kids, whatever it may be. So this person is trying to keep things together, and because for whatever reason, now the judge is going to grant a divorce, give the person who filed for divorce, who may actually be at fault for the divorce, give him or her the kids and make the other person pay child support. And God forbid in the state of Texas that you not pay your child support. They will throw you in jail. I've had friends that have been in jail. One guy told me, Jeff, I was in there 3 times. I was broke. I was a very successful person, but after this whole process, everything was taken out of me, and they threw me in jail. He told me he was in there one time for 3 weeks. Very first day in jail. And this is the Attorney General loves this stuff. I mean, he can talk about how much money he collects under child support. But he said the first day I was in jail, I saw a guard pick up a youth, like a teenage kid, smart-mouthed the guard, picked him up and body slammed him and took him out on a stretcher. And then, what am I in here doing this? Why am I in here for this? So we're criminalizing a person whose big crime is that he wanted or she wanted to keep the marriage together. And, the Attorney General, if you don't pay your child support, if you go to the Texas Attorney General and look for people, he will have pictures posted of people who are behind in child support. People who maybe in some instances wanted to keep their marriage together, But he's asking the public for help to get these deadbeats or these child support evaders. It's horrendous. And our Attorney General, they think that they're doing a great job. They're helping the people that need to have child support paid. They've victimized and they're re-victimizing an innocent person in many instances. And this, by the way, happens both to men and women. The majority have been to men, but I know that women have gone through the same thing. One lady that I know, her husband was making over $400,000 a year, was depriving her of seeing her children. She tried to take him to court because deprivation, interference of visitation, is actually a felony offense in the state of Texas. 16 times he did it. The judge basically, what the judge did, took the children away from her, gave them to him, and by the way, she got child support. She was making $30,000 a year. He was making I think she was making $24,000 a year. He was making over $400,000, and she had to pay him child support. How did she pay it? Her mother took money out of her retirement and went back to work to help her pay it so that she didn't have to go to jail. And this is the wonderful system of no-fault unilateral divorce in the state of Texas. Some people might say that the child support and no-fault divorce are two different issues, but they're very intimately related to each other. The ninth issue is this, going back to the 14th Amendment, is that no-fault unilateral divorce deprives a person of equal protection under the law. Equal protection under the law. And what it has done instead, it's created equal victimization. We're supposed to be protecting people, not victimizing people. And I will argue that the state of Texas is victimizing and re-victimizing innocent people, and they're acting like they're doing such a wonderful job. Nor shall any state deny to any person within its jurisdiction equal protection of the laws. Again, the 14th Amendment is designed to protect the rights of people, and I'm going to defer on this if there's any questions to Matthew Johnson. Matthew's done a wonderful job with this, and he can do a much better job explaining it if there are any questions. Number 10, divorce, unilateral divorce, often erases an entire side of a child's extended family. Grandparent alienation, uncle and aunt alienation. Sometimes it even brings alienation between brothers and sisters. But as a grandparent, I can't see my grandchildren right now. And it's one of the most heartbreaking things imaginable. My daughter filed a lawsuit against me when Child Protective Services got involved, and I had been warning her, don't do certain things because you don't understand the way Child Protective Services work. Well, it turns out that she sued me because Child Protective Services would not tell them I had nothing to do with the whole incident, the whole report. My ex-wife got up on the stand and committed perjury, and there was no punishment for her, and I have not been able to see my grandchildren now for 3.5 years, even though I have been declared innocent. Everybody knew that it was perjury that was committed. My grandchildren, my older grandson, whenever he would see me, no matter whose arms he was in, he'd come running, squiggling out and come running over to me. He spent so much time at our house. My youngest grandson took his very first steps walking to me. And this whole thing with divorce, I understand perjury is a separate issue, but the whole thing with the family court, unilateral divorce, all of this stuff takes place a lot of times. If it's not the direct cause, it's a contributing cause to alienation of a grandparent or extended family. And an entire extended half of that child's family can be erased from his or her or their lives. No-fault divorce, number 11, completely upends the justice system. There is absolutely no justice in a family court where a mere allegation is considered proof. And we know that there are people that have gone through the thing that have claimed irreconcilable differences, or one person has, and they get remarried. So what just happened in family court then? Did that person commit perjury? Here's what it is in the state of Texas. Even though two people may get divorced because one person has claimed insupportability, within 30 days they're allowed to remarry each other. No, they're not allowed to remarry anybody else, but they're allowed to remarry each other. The state of Texas realize that this whole thing of irreconcilable differences, insupportability, can be used as a lie. That's what the family code allows. So when you have a system that's supposed to be talking about justice, and injustice is rampant in the system, how are we supposed to look at the entire judicial system? Personally, I was one of the people that, if I do the right thing, if I say the right thing, my innocence will be proved. I have very little trust in the judicial system in the state of Texas. And it's not just the family court system, but I've pursued a couple of things other directions as well in related to some of these issues, and the entire system stinks. We have a state commission for judicial conduct that's supposed to review judges' behavior. and it's a joke. It's a joke. So, no-fault divorce upends the justice system. I've just got a couple of more quick points and then I'll be done here. Number 12, the family court system rewards lying. It rewards lying. It's no secret that divorce attorneys sometimes encourage a person to say, oh, I'm afraid of my husband, oh, I'm afraid of my wife. Maybe we can get a restraining order. That will be an advantage to us to let you get the kids and to make him pay you child support or her child support, whatever the case may be. The family court system rewards lying. There is no cross-examination. If there were cross-examination, half of the divorces would be nullified. But it does not take place. And the other thing about the family court system rewarding lying is that the family court system is a great circuit for divorce attorneys to financially rape people when they're vulnerable, when they're and taking sick marriages that may need treatment and trying to destroy them through the execution chamber of divorce. And these attorneys will tell you that they're doing such a wonderful job and how they're helping out and everything like that. They're lying through their teeth. They're lying through their teeth and they're raping people. And somehow, well, if they look at the balance sheet and they see that, well, you might have $400,000 in assets or whatever, that lets them know how much money they have to play with. And by the way, if your children's college education gets lost in that same thing, well, that's just part of the cost of getting an amicable, no-fault divorce, according to these divorce attorneys. Best interest of the children is now that your child does not get to go to college because they have raped you and they've transferred your money set apart for the kids to them. And it's horrendous. Legal separation. Number 13, I was going to mention this very briefly because somebody mentioned it last week. Legal separation should be an option. I agree with them because, again, out of religious convictions, there are people that say, I do not think religiously I can get a divorce. It is forbidden by my faith. It may be that we have to have a legal separation to protect either our assets or to protect the person from possibly violence or whatever the case may be. We don't have that in Texas. We have divorce. That's what it can be. Anyway, next issue I'm going to talk about real quickly, and again, I'm going to refer this to Matthew Johnson once again. But in the Constitution of Texas, it says, Section 56, prohibited local and special laws. The legislature shall not, except as otherwise provided in this Constitution, pass any local or special law authorizing granting divorces. And yet that's exactly what the Texas Family Code has done. It has violated the Texas Constitution. It says it shall not pass any special law regarding granting divorces, and yet it does. That's exactly what it does. One of the things lately that has come to pass nearby where I live, in Carrollton, which is just a few miles from me, there is a 6-year-old boy, and the father and mother are divorced, but the mother evidently has primary custodial conservatorship or whatever, and she wants to chemically castrate the boy to turn him into a girl by age 8. And the father is protesting, and it's called Save James. Save James. The father is going to be, as far as I understand it, mandated to pay for this, to pay for the abuse to his children. His child, his son. There is an issue with divorce that somehow when divorce takes place, parents are now treated as if they're second-class citizens. Like, there's married parents, and they have all rights. We'd never get involved if they were married parents. But with divorced parents, the state can somehow now come in and tell a father or mother what to do because somehow they're not good parents. Parental rights are fundamental rights, and they cannot be taken away without due process and a higher level of proof against the person. You cannot just say, well, I'm going to just terminate your rights for no reason. There's supposed to be proof involved. What happens with unilateral divorce in many instances, the person who is the innocent person who's trying to keep the marriage together, trying to keep the family intact, loses primary contact with the kids and is treated as a visitor in his or her child's life and an entertainer when he or she has them. Instead of being a parent and having parental rights, they're almost looked at as being entertainer-in-chief or something else. So anyway, there are other issues that I could talk about, but I thought I'm going to get these things out on the table. Unilateral forced divorce, in my opinion, is one of the most unjust laws in the state of Texas and in the United States. And for our legislators to not have the appetite to address this issue. They just don't have the appetite to talk about the systemic plundering and destruction of families authorized by the state, mandated in some instance by the state, is inexcusable, in my opinion. And I'm going to be closing up here. I would love to open it up for questions. Again, I'm trying to fight the whole unilateral no-fault divorce area in the public square. I think if you've noticed, for the most part, I have not used one argument from Scripture. The church has been silent. The church should be speaking up. Shame on the church. Shame on the church for abandoning Scripture and for not standing up for what's right. But in the public square, I'm trying to argue things more from the case of constitutional law and things, the arguments that you've heard here. But there are other arguments as well that could easily be made. We're trying to take this thing down. It's a dastardly system. Look, it took us how many years to get rid of slavery? And 50 years after Roe v. Wade, we're seeing changes being made. You know, Roe v. Wade came after unilateral no-fault divorce. The thing is, we've just not challenged it, and we need to challenge it and take this whole system down because our children and our grandchildren's lives depend on us being there. I will not be silent because there's too much at stake.